Councillor McKean, you look so serious.
It's a serious role, Councillor Banga.
Happy Vasaki.
That should make you smile, Scott. There you go.
Actually, seeing the former McEwen Student Association president on the call makes me smile too.
Corey, can we test your audio again?
Good morning. I'll bring us back to order here and roll call just to establish attendance for members of the committee and the continuation of yesterday's executive committee meeting. Councillor McKean, I heard your voice a moment ago.
I am here, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. Councillor Cartmel, I can see. Good morning. With my own eyes, welcome. Councillor Hamilton had indicated she would not be able to join us, and Councillor Walters had indicated as well he would not be able to join us in this extraordinary continuation. So, but I see we have other members of council joining us this morning. I see Councillor Essinger, good morning. I see Councillor Banga, good morning. Any other members of council on the line today?
Yeah, I'm here as well.
Oh, thanks, Councillor Henderson. Anyone else?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, Councillor Knack.
Good morning.
Councillor Katarina, good morning. Great. That is lots.
Councillor Esslinger is also there, I can see, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and Councillor Banga, are you okay to do that protocol at 1:30?
Definitely, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll do it then. Okay. Let's resume then on the next item of business, which was 6.6. I understand we've had a substitution in the speakers. So Danica McConnell will be replacing Paige Gorsak on behalf of Free Transit Edmonton. I need a motion to that effect, though, just to confirm it.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Cartmel. We'll seek unanimous consent. Any objections to that substitution? Not seeing any. Then those will be our speakers, and it will be Corey Longo, Greg Mady, and Danica McConnell to speak to 6.6 when we get to it. But I imagine there are introductory remarks from administration first.
Your Worship, we do have a brief presentation on the fee schedule update and one specific item to add, and specifically relating to a smart fare category, which would introduce a flat fee when we launch the payment system in the fall. And that was the primary change to the existing previously approved fee schedule. So with that, we have Carrie Houghton McDonald, our branch manager for ETS, as well as Christopher Ryan, our acting director of business integration, with us this morning to talk about the report. We also have others on the call should other support be required. So I'll be happy to turn it over to Ms. Houghton McDonald now to take you through the brief presentation update.
Thank you, Gord, and good morning, everybody. We are here today to talk about another layer of fare-related support that we'd like to introduce for riders, this time related to the implementation of smart fare payment technology. Before we review the details of the request, we would like to give some background and context about transit faring. The End Poverty Edmonton strategy identified two fare-related items as key game-changer actions, introducing a low-income transit pass program, as well as providing fare-free transit for kids 12 and under. We implemented the Ride Transit program in 2017, and then in 2018, fare-free transit for kids 12 and under was approved. Also in 2017, the 10-year transit strategy was approved by Council. One of the key pillars in the strategy relates to fare policy and directed a redesign of the policy as well as adoption of smart fare payment technology. In early 2018, we initiated our fare policy redesign project. Public engagement took place in the spring and summer. There was support for redistributing pricing to support people who need the most help, support for a 40 to 45% cost recovery target, as well as support for moving to a principle-based policy design. In the fall of 2018, as part of the 4-year budget process, the revenue targets for each of the 4 years, as well as fee schedules, were approved. In 2019, a revenue management audit was completed by the City Auditor. Recommendations to strengthen the fare policy and be more clear and deliberate about expectations for cost recovery were outlined. Then in the fall of 2019, Council approved expanding the Day Pass product to apply to families so that 2 adults and 3 children can have unlimited travel for the day using public transit for the now $10.25 price point. In November 2019, we had a discussion about ridership levers and then received approval of our redesigned fare policy. Outcomes included realigning pricing to reflect percentage discounts approved in the policy, as well as fare-free transit for seniors experiencing low income, and a sliding scale model for ride transit users. Youth monthly pass, as well as tickets for youth and seniors, also decreased in price. We also confirmed that the range for cost recovery was 40 to 45%, and we have been performing in the 40 to 41% range for the past few years. In December 2019, Council canceled the planned cash fare increase that was in the budget for 2020. In March 2020, a sliding scale model was approved in order to support seniors. In December 2020, the cash fare increase for 2021 was deferred until May 2021, rather than implementing in February. Other non-cash fare increases were approved to proceed. And that brings us to today and our proposal to add a new category to the fee schedule, again to reflect implementation of Smart Fare. We understand the need for supporting Edmontonians to access transit service. We've made several important changes over the last 3 years to support people. So again, as examples, fare-free transit for seniors experiencing low income, a sliding scale model, lowered pricing for youth, our day pass expansion to apply to families up to 5 people. We've increased the number of free monthly passes for houseless Edmontonians up to 1,900 per month. And we responded to support U-Pass suspension during COVID, temporarily expanding ride transit as well as the youth pass eligibility. Our fare policy enables these offerings and will enable us to offer this new category as well as fare capping. We're leading in Canada for a fare policy that is anchored in core principles. So this new category is another layer of support, discounts for more frequent users of transit as outlined in our fare policy. This is a common element for transit agencies that have this technology in place. It incentivizes adoption of smart fare payment as well as pay-as-you-go fares, and it's a key part of fare capping. So TTC, TransLink, York Region, Mississauga, OC Transpo, and Quebec City all have different pricing for cash fares versus a smart fare trip. In this model, the price of a transit trip is reduced. It will be $3 with a smart card, and for those that don't have a smart card, they can get a smart ticket available for $3.50. For cash-only users, they will have the option to load a smart card or get a smart ticket in order to access that discounted rate. So if you're a cash-only user, you can load the card using cash at a wide network of retail outlets, or you can use your cash in one of the 117 smart fare vending machines that will be available throughout the system. One of the benefits with fare capping is that once a user hits their monthly cap, they will then ride for free for the rest of the month. Today, a user would have to upfront pay the cost of the pass, but in a smart fare environment, they can incrementally load their cards and will benefit from fare capping when they reach the price limit. Smart fare launches in the fall, so we need this change incorporated now in order to plan and program the system properly. It takes effect in the fall, but given the first full year of the changes in 2022, that is the fee schedule that we would like to update. So what comes next for transit faring? So as mentioned, Smart Fare launches in the fall, and we're really excited about that. It will be a phased implementation. As per the motion from earlier this month, we will also be undertaking an anti-racism review of our fare programs like Path and Ride Transit, working with our key community partners to remove any barriers and improve access. We have process improvement opportunities related to the Ride Transit program, such as looking at a simplified way for people to access low-income programs offered through the city and removing barriers in that application process. Thank you very much. This concludes our presentation today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have after you've heard from today's speakers.
Just a process question. There was on Agenda Review Committee an unrelated report for exec in 2 weeks about fare schedule changes to incorporate the smart card option. Is that rendered moot by this, or do we still need that other report in 2 weeks?
So that other report references the bylaw-related changes that we'll need to implement. So they're connected, but separate.
Okay, so, and they cascade. Now I understand. Okay, thank you for connecting the dots. Okay, so to Corey Longo, Greg Mady, and Danica McConnell, I think you've each been here before, but just as a quick refresher, you'll each have 5 minutes to speak one after another. I'd ask you to remain muted when it's not your turn to speak or ask questions, just to cut down on feedback. And also, I'd ask you not to use the chat function in the meet because it can create issues of fairness and decorum and interfere technically with the live stream. So please, also, if you have something available that you can keep time with, I'd encourage you to set up your own countdown clock to manage the 5 minutes. We'll run a timer in the room here, but so that you can make best use of your 5 minutes, I'd encourage you to have your own clock there. And finally, of course, stay on the call after we've heard from each of you, because there will likely be some follow-up questions, potentially, from members of council. And then after that, once we've concluded hearing from you and asking questions of you, you may stay on the call muted to observe the proceedings. However, if you need to go and rejoin later, feel free to use the council live stream at edmonton.ca/meetings as the place to monitor the proceedings here. So without further ado then, I'm just going to roll call to make sure that we can hear each of you clearly first, and that we have a good connection. Corey Longo, you're there? Corey, are you there?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
That's me. I'm called into my phone and on video with you. I had problems with my computer.
Understood.
So, good morning.
Good morning. Greg Mady?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. And Danica McConnell?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. Okay, Corey, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here to share my thoughts with you. I'd like to speak primarily to the piece on the fare increase from $3.50 to $3.75. So I'd like to start off by saying that in the middle of a global pandemic, at a time when so many families are struggling, I think making transit even more expensive is the wrong thing to do. My father and I both love taking public transit. He's always enthusiastic about the experience. But even for our income, for two-income households, the cost of a trip for our family is a big barrier. And because we are fortunate enough to have a vehicle, it's oftentimes cheaper just to pile in the car. But just like my kids, I love public transit. From the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to reducing wear and tear on the roads, to the community building aspects of getting people moving around our city in diverse ways, ETS is an important part of our city. I believe strongly that our goal in the city must be to get more people to use transit. That goal is a big part of the city plan. Edmonton doesn't have to be a place where taking transit doesn't even cross people's minds because it's too expensive and too inconvenient. But to get there, from where we are now, will require a new approach. One that invests in making the city better and not cuts to services while hiking fares year after year. As a city, it's time to put our money where our mouth is, to stop talking about building a more accessible, high-quality transit system and actually do it. It makes no sense for our city to give millions of dollars in grants to developers and then nickel and dime people who rely on public transit. Making the lives of regular working people easier, not harder, should be Council's first priority right now, which is why this fare increase is absolutely the wrong approach. I urge councillors to freeze transit fares instead. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Greg Mady.
Hello, Mayor Iverson and councillors. Unfortunately, I had to shuffle childcare schedules around so that I could give my full attention to the two presentations that I was supposed to give at yesterday's committee meeting. But one was moved to May and the other was postponed until today. So I'm working double duty today, so you might have to bear with me. I could really use some of that quality, affordable childcare that you were talking about yesterday, but that's a discussion for another time. It is with incredible disappointment that the citizens of Edmonton are forced to organize and once again fight to be heard by their elected officials, public servants who are supposed to be representing them and their best interest. While we all anxiously await the smart fare rollout, it seems wholly unnecessary to increase cash fares while we wait for its implementation. Everyday essential workers are going to work, allowing those of us privileged enough to stay home to get our hot meals and groceries delivered right to our front door. Yet, during a time when essential workers are being hailed as heroes for exposing themselves to COVID-19 on a daily basis, City Council is now asking them to pay more. They are leaving their houses hours before work, walking up to 20 minutes to get to the nearest bus stop thanks to the redesign, to get on an underfunded transit system filled with other essential workers just trying to get to work on time to make our lives easier, and allowing our society to continue to run as safely as possible. And City Council is once again asking them to pay more. When is enough enough? It seems as though City Council is playing a tune straight from the Pinochet-Friedman songbook and acting as if they have come up with some crazy new idea to save the city. If we underfund social services and ask for increased fees for it, it will deteriorate, and you will be forced to sell off public assets for pennies on the dollar to be run by a private interest. The situation will have forced your hand and making Edmontonians think that they don't deserve the best. I am here to tell you that we see right through it, and it is getting tiring. It seems like you don't actually want ridership to go up. If you have no funds designated for another transit garage, even though they're all at capacity, how could you add more buses and trains to the system if ridership did go up dramatically? You can't just approve a bunch of words in a document and say your job is done because you have a city plan. You have to make it happen, but you're skating to where the puck was yesterday and not where it will be. Quite frankly, it's disgusting that fare increases is even being considered during a time like this. It is embarrassing that we have to take time out of our lives to remind our elected officials of this reality. We need a city council who works tirelessly to better the lives of working people, not make it harder. Stop hurting those who make your lives comfortable and start representing the people who put you there to make the right decisions on issues that affected their lives. It's not too much to ask. Please take a step back and ask yourself, why did you get involved in politics in the first place? What are you trying to accomplish? And how does this achieve that? And my favorite question, how does this fit within the city plan? Or does that even matter to you? I look forward to a healthy conversation of how you think increasing fares, decreasing services will result in higher ridership and a better public transit, while allowing us to reach our climate targets. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Never been compared to Pinochet before. That's new. Last but not least is Danica McConnell.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Danica McConnell, and as previously stated, I'm an organizer with Free Transit Edmonton. I'm here today to deliver comments on behalf of over 1,500 Edmontonians who signed a petition this week and offered countless personal testimonials demanding Edmonton City Council freeze public transit fares. I understand the main focus of agenda item 6.6 is smart fare, and the hike in cash fare prices from $3.50 to $3.75 is included as only a small footnote. But it's an action with huge consequences for residents in our city. So I see today and 6.6 as an important opportunity to reconsider the scheduled May 1st fare increase. Transit fare increases disproportionately affect low-wage workers, migrant workers, folks with disabilities, and QT BIPOC folks. In the middle of this global pandemic, those are the folks staffing our hospitals, grocery stores, food delivery, and other essential services. They shouldn't be forced to pay more while risking their lives to keep the rest of us safe. Now, I know a big question on the proposal will be cost. How would council account for the lost revenue that would happen if fares were frozen? But I want to push you to consider 3 major losses that will result from increasing fares. First, increasing fares would result in a loss of ridership. The city's own data shows that with every fare increase, ridership drops by hundreds of thousands of rides. In a year where ridership has plummeted for reasons outside of council's control, it's illogical to take steps that push more riders away from transit. Next, a fare increase would result in loss of credibility on this council's commitment to climate action. I do think this council recognizes the crucial role that public transportation plays in an energy transition. The really beautiful report from yesterday morning sets a goal of 50% of trips made by transit in active transportation by 2040. But raising fares won't get us there. It will punish the folks who are transit dependent and make transit less appealing to non-users. It also won't line up with plans for a just and equitable transition, given that low income and disadvantaged groups will bear the brunt of those financial consequences. And finally, increasing fares will result in the loss of trust from residents looking to you to guide a pandemic recovery that leaves no one behind. Who will be left behind when fares go up? Ultimately, we are calling on council to stop evaluating public services solely by their price tag and stop framing them as some sort of burden to the taxpayer. Instead, start recognizing them as an investment into our city's future and part of what makes our city great. Good and affordable transit helps to lower emissions, reduce congestion, and create good unionized jobs. It helps out families, reduces isolation, and builds pathways towards economic prosperity. But raising fares works against that. In a time where people are struggling financially, we need leadership from our city council to drive a just recovery. Now, I know that leadership's possible. We saw council take decisive action at the start of the pandemic, making transit fare-free to protect workers and support communities. But as we enter the third wave of this pandemic, we're seeing the exact opposite response. In his land acknowledgement, Mayor Iveson noted the opportunity for this council to build a better city, a sustainable city, and a just city. A freeze to public transit fares, as called by 1,500 Edmontonians and counting, aligns with that goal. Thank you.
Questions for our panelists? Just bringing up the list
If
here.
no one else does, I might have a question.
Just stand by for a moment.
Ah, I see the list is coming up.
Councillor McKean would be the first committee member on the list, I believe, and we'll get that one shortly.
I can see the list now, and we can add Councillor Paquette to the list. Councillor McKean is up first.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentations this morning. Ms. McConnell, I'm going to start with you, pick on you. I just wondered if you appreciate that there's no magic bullet here, that if we freeze fares, then we probably have to then make that revenue up somewhere else. And it's been a year where transit revenue has been considerably down and really impacting the city. So we would have to then, I will check this with administration. My assumption is we would have to transfer that burden, if that's the right word, onto the property taxpayer. And we want to always be careful about that, about not impacting housing affordability. But it is your suggestion that this particular move is more detrimental than shifting some of this burden onto the property taxes. Yes?
I'd say the word burden is quite heavy in terms of the collective responsibility of a city that deems to be healthy or family friendly. And when we think about how we already pay for it with the 61-39% split, we're already there. The majority is coming from public dollars. I just hate to use that word burden, as this is something that would improve even non-riders' lives in terms of congestion. And again, like I said earlier, with the environmental goals of this city's leadership. And ultimately, our budgets are choices. And we see council making public services a lower priority and making low-income communities a lower priority, even when they're giving cuts to, say, real estate developers. And I'd love to get more into those numbers, perhaps in the email correspondence, whatever is easiest for you. But
even with the low-income transit pass, we have the passes for families, as was just described by administration. Like, I think there's been some effort on the part of this council to have passes that would make transit use more affordable. You're just suggesting that's not enough.
no, I think we're still leaving an exhaustive rate of people behind. Not everyone can afford at the beginning of the month to pay those upfront costs of family passes or even individual passes, with so many, especially right now in our economic placement in the constant downturn, it seems, that we're supposed to be getting a just transition out of. We need to be considering the folks that are sadly living paycheck to paycheck or day to day right now that just can't be paying that upfront.
Right. Okay. Well, again, thanks everybody for their submissions today. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McKean. Councillor Baingut.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out and making your presentations. My first question is for Ms. Longo. You said from 350 to 375 is going to put way extra burden on your family. Would you be able to tell us how much burden would it be? I mean, it's not every day that you folks use the bus. It's if it's to and from work, that's probably about 20 days per month.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. Like we are in an unusual situation right now. My family's not using transit as we used to before because we are privileged. I'm currently at home at this time, so I'm not having to drive back and forth to work. I'm actually on mat leave currently. But the thing is that not very many people have those privileges. There's a lot of people that rely on public transit, like was mentioned, to go to work. They're the ones that are vulnerable. I saw a bus pass by 118th Ave here just the other day, and it was packed. There's a lot of people relying on transit to take care of their family, to buy groceries, to get groceries, to go to work, to protect their livelihoods. And although I don't have those numbers of how it impacts my family right now, I know I've heard from a lot of people in this area that it's a large burden and a big barrier for them, and it's making times more tough for families.
Okay, and don't you think this increase in fare, or actually suggested increase in fare, is compensated by if people wanted to buy the monthly pass and or the family pass, would it not do the same thing?
Yeah, as mentioned, I mean, not everybody can afford that money up front. We are in a high rate of unemployment right now in Edmonton. People are stretching their paychecks. And, I work for an organization that represents workers. And we've seen, tons of cuts. And people still need to get around the city. Even if they have job loss or if they can't afford a car, they rely on public transit. And I think that this is absolutely the wrong direction.
Okay. And you also mentioned in your presentation about new approach. would you like to share? If you were the decision maker, what would you do?
It's a great question. Well, I stand in support of fare-free transit Edmonton, and I think, like I said in my presentation, the ultimate goal for City Council is to make transit more accessible and more affordable. What we're trying to do is reach those climate target goals, and we're trying to provide good public services for people. And in order to do that, we need to increase ridership. And we've seen this in other areas in people's lives, where just a minor increase in amount of dollars or amount of payment creates a barrier for them to actually access those services. So I'd like to see this actually go in the opposite direction. Instead of increase, I'd like to see a decrease.
Thank you. And Mr. Meddy, question for you. Increasing fares and increasing service or keeping the service same? Both these work in opposite directions. Which one is more concerning to you?
That's an interesting question, Councillor Benga. I think that just looking at it as a dichotomy in and of itself is flawed logic, because we are in a situation where we were given money from the federal government to invest in public transit, and we put it into the LRT expansion, is to my understanding. We were given money from the federal government to help with COVID relief, and some of it went to luxury condos being developed downtown that have already been processing. So it's not even like the project wouldn't continue without that money. All of this money could be spent on ways to help working people around the city. I myself would love to take transit as much as possible, but unfortunately, due to the amount of time that it would take me to use it, I just don't do it. And for me, money's not an issue. But I'm not everybody. I'm somebody who wants to adjust our climate impact, and it's very important to me. Some people can't afford it. So I wouldn't mind paying a little bit more if the system was well funded and well structured, but it's not. So you're charging more for an inferior product, and that's where you come up with some funding problems. So they're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money, and I'm surprised that council doesn't see that in regards to this, and especially when they're trying to reach their climate targets. Sorry, I see that the time clock is clicking, so I'll stop.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Banga. Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for your presentations. Maybe a bit hyperbole at one point, but one of the things that I would ask is, okay, so you've been asked, like, you know, one of the choices that conceptually that council has is we've got a transit fare that costs money. We're really in a tight spot where this year there's just no way that taxes can be raised to raise that money. Money from the federal government has been earmarked for another transit need to provide service. And so what's being sold is the idea that we have to raise fares a modest amount in order to help cover some of this cost. And because we've got such a marked decrease in ridership, those costs, because of economies of scale, are a little bit more than they normally would be in regular years. So this is the position that council is being put in. So I'm just wondering if you have any studies or information that would refute the idea that raising fares would have an impact on ridership and would in fact deliver more money into city coffers.
Hi, Councillor Paquette. I'm not sure if that was a directed question to any of the three of us.
Anyone can answer. There's three of you on the panel, and
absolutely. More than happy to send that to council. We have the numbers, and a lot of it is based on the city's very own research when it comes to any sort of increase and the disproportionate effects it has on the system itself and having that ridership drop. So more than happy to provide that.
Okay, but you don't have that information to provide to council today in your presentation.
Specific numbers right now, no, sorry.
Okay, because that's kind of exactly what's needed by council. because there's a decision, especially for a committee, because there's a decision today. And typically, council can't make decisions based on people's opinions, but has to make decisions on the evidence before them or evidence that they've researched themselves. So that's where council is in a tough spot. Any response to that from any of our panelists?
Well, sorry, I think Danica did just mention it. I mean, that information is readily available to all councillors. It was conducted by the city. It is very easy for any councillor to access. They just need to have the desire to access it. And I think that's the issue here, is that we don't see that desire. And I mean, just to speak to the bit of hyperbole that happened, I mean, it is, I did do that on purpose, because it seems like we're yelling at a brick wall here a lot of the time, and nobody's even bothering to listen or answer. And I mean, for a brief second, I know I had the mayor's attention, and that to me is worth it. And in this case, it's very simple. I mean, if there is information you'd like to access, it is there for you to access. It is created by the city. Just simply ask administration and they can provide it.
Yeah, okay, I will do that. Because there is elasticity issues that we know of, that when you raise fares, you decrease ridership. And so then the question is, what's the balance there? And have any of you ever lived in poverty to the extent where you had to put food back on a grocery shelf because you didn't have that extra quarter?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, myself, well, not unfortunately, fortunately, no, I've never been in that scenario, but we have had some very heartbreaking testimonies by Edmontonians provided to us as they sign this petition. Folks who are now realizing, I already have to budget down to the cent. How am I supposed to accommodate this when the transit passes and any kind of calculation I make to cash fares to get by day to day is more than my utilities bill? People are wondering whether or not their current housing is going to be able to balance with this. So me, myself, no, but thousands of Edmontonians that have reached out to us.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason I ask is because my family was in deep poverty for many years, and that was a reality for us. And imagine having a number of children and you can't even pay for a reduced pass because you just frankly do not. That's out of reach. That's a dream. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson?
Yeah, I think probably I'll ask this question of Ms. McConnell. One of the things I'm interested in, I know the big answer is, and I would incline to agree with you, I've always felt we should be trying to get our transit fares down, not up. But at this point, we've already approved the increases to most of the fare products. It's really just the single fare that's still, I think theoretically we can talk about it, not here, but at a future meeting. So, understanding we probably can't do all of it. I'm just wondering, what target, it's interesting to me, what is the most important target in terms of our fare products to go after here? And I ironically, in this particular report, what we're being asked to do is make it so that people can get the benefit of the discount that you would get with a monthly pass, but do it ride by ride, which seems to me answers some of the problem of trying to get the discount through to people who can't afford to buy a pass once a month. So just your thoughts on, I'm wondering which is the best hill to die on here. And I'm wondering, just your thoughts on that, because in actual fact, this particular motion recommendation may actually be getting to some of the stuff that you guys are talking about, that you get not a bad discount now if you can use the pass, and it allows you basically to buy your monthly pass in increments of individual rides. Thoughts on that?
I think one of the issues at hand that we want to underscore more is there's a lot of vulnerable populations and our houseless community that simply can't have that on their person. It's just not an option. It's the single passes. And I think obviously we are an organization pushing for fair and good transit, no fares at access. But right now, this hill to die on, I would say, is this measure right now to freeze the fare where it is. as we look into our third wave.
Okay. But the motion that we have in front of us right now so it's not going to answer it because of the problem of having to have the pass on you. But it will help rather than hinder, I'm guessing, and then we'll have the later discussion, I suspect, when we do our budget adjustments about what we do with the actual single fare. Okay. Sorry.
Can I just ask
you had a thought? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that, from my understanding, is something that has been delayed, and we're not there yet. We're not there at a decreased smart fare rate. Where we are right now is in the middle of a pandemic, a third wave, after a year of already being here. Families are completely stretched. This is adding more burden. This is adding more challenges for families. So to have a solution that is down the road, sure, fine, whatever, but what we're talking about is right now.
Yeah. Well, or we'll be talking about it in a few weeks. Great. Okay. Well, thanks. That's helpful just to get your thoughts on that. So even with that pass in September, we're still leaving. There are still some issues for people who are going to need the casual fare, not because they're not regular users, but because they can't afford the full amount. And the pass, of the smart pass, smart fare may not be an answer as well. Okay, great. Thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Any other questions for our speakers today? Not seeing. Councillor Paquette? Do you have more questions for the speakers?
Yeah, just a couple quick follow-ups.
Okay. Councillor Cartmel, if you could take the chair for a moment, I'll be back.
I have the chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Paquette.
Thank you. So,
do you need to add one of us to the committee, or will you have quorum issues?
You're now part of the committee for the next few minutes, Councillor Henderson.
Thanks.
Yep.
as committee member Councillor Henderson had mentioned, some of these things are already decided, I think, as far as the debate goes, potentially, about the passes and the cost of passes. The cash share is still sort of something that is being debated. So let's focus on that. So one of the things that we do know is that if you increase fares, any increase that you, so per quarter apparently, and this is the data that we have in our own system, a 3% increase of fare leads to a 1% decrease in ridership. So along with some of the feedback that we've gotten from the bus network redesign, where people are going to find it a little bit challenging at first to adjust, we're also considering adding on another quarter, which will lead to a 1% decrease in ridership, and then later another quarter after that, which will lead to further decrease in ridership. Now, that being said, we've got a smart card feature coming that will reduce fares to $3. So for any of the panelists, having that information, does it make sense to you to intentionally decrease ridership for a potential increase in funding to transit if we're moving to $3 using a smart card anyway?
No, this feels as though, and I think this is what it is that now community members are facing the punishment because of this delay by council, or I don't know if you want to call it a delay, but an illogical timing to have a short-term increase to bring it then reduced. Plus, that's simply the flat fare. A lot of folks cannot control and choose where they can live in terms of any sort of routes they need to take to just simply survive and work. So it's really also quite daunting that we throw around this $3 flat rate when we know most folks that rely on transit have to go a couple of routes. I'm not sure in the new redesign that now slashes about 100 of those routes, but these folks should be paying a reduced rate since they have to come into centralized areas to access their services and their jobs because of those kinds of barriers. So I absolutely think that this is an an unfair and unjust thing to be doing, even though it's for a short amount of time. Plus, there's also the argument to say about people's habits, those that are privileged, that have the choice between their singular vehicle versus taking public transport. There could be some long-term losses that we're seeing there from people that used to be frequent users as they create new habits, but it's absolutely nothing that we can find any sort of justification in.
Right. Well, okay. So council also has a long-term plan for transit that will actually, end up extending, but we did have to do a redesign. Like, I'll just put that out there. But so that, we're sort of, having this issue about quarters, because to some people it might as well be nothing. What's a quarter? To some people it's everything. And the split here is that there are two worlds that aren't really listening to each other a little bit. On one hand, folks are saying, look, just don't increase it. And you've got sort of this organization that's saying, we are not, if we don't mind every quarter, we're going to be in big trouble. But not listening to people who say, we understand it completely. If we don't mind every quarter, we lose a lot of ability to get opportunities to improve our lives and lift ourselves out of poverty, whether you believe it's down to a quarter or not. And yet you've got an organization that's saying, we've got to, so everyone needs that quarter. But, who will be impacted the most, the city or the individuals? And that's where really the debate comes down. So your response.
Sorry, Councillor Paquette, if you don't mind, I would just like to address this. I think it is an issue of priorities here. I've sat in on many meetings with council and committee where small business owners lined up in droves to say that they're being nickeled and dimed to death by the city and that they cannot suffer any increase in anything. And the city said, oh, of course, absolutely, we'll give you zeros. Meanwhile, the vast majority of working Edmontonians who are needing to access public transit are being literally nickel and dime to death, not just as a phrase, but literally nickel and dime to death, who are unable to take a day off work to show up to a committee meeting, which then gets canceled and moved to the next day to speak to their issues, and they're getting thrown under the bus, so to speak. And with that, it is just important to acknowledge the fact that there takes a lot of privilege to be able to sit in on these meetings and a lot of time that they can take off. And I just find it really ironic that those who have all that privilege get listened to and those who don't get ignored. So nickels and dimes mean a lot more than it seems like it does for some people who flippantly use that term and people who actually have to pay it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, I'm out of time.
I see no further questions for this panel, so thank you all for your comments. We'll now turn to administration, but before we do, suggestion was that we might be able to cross-reference 7.1 as there's been some reference to those statistics and some other data in confluence with the discussion around 6.6. So I'll ask for a motion to cross-reference those.
Happy to do that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McKean. Is there any objection to cross-referencing? Not hearing any. Then you guys are okay to answer questions on both? Okay, great. All right. I'm trying to remember who selected this. Councillor Walters. So he's not here. So I've got Councillor McKean from the committee on the board first to ask questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to start with what we know about the 25-cent increase, though that's sort of tangential to today's report in motion. But do we, in the context, and it may be really hard to predict right now because of the pandemic, well, let me ask it this way. Why did we have a recommendation for that increase?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So in the 2019 to 22 budget, we had proposed different scenarios, and one of the scenarios involved cash fare increases, and that was because we knew we were going to be introducing a lower price point in Smart Fare. We had revenue targets as well through the budget process, but we needed to differentiate again following suit with other transit properties. They typically have different price points for cash-only users. We're trying to discourage the use of cash. There's much more benefit for people who can use either the smart tickets or the smart card system. So that was the rationale behind it. Obviously, we didn't predict we'd be in a global pandemic, but we feel that with all of the other offerings and different supportive measures in place, hopefully that helps balance it a little bit better. I just want to say, I grew up in a low-income household. When I hear people talk about, the impact of a 25-cent, cash fare, I don't want to give the impression that administration isn't thinking about impact. It's our position that we feel we have a lot of other tools that can be of support to address some of those needs.
Yeah, it's been suggested that we haven't talked about this, and I find that a little bit frustrating. But please, if you could, go through the variety of ways that a working poor family or a working poor individual can access some form of aid in regards to transit in Edmonton today.
Thank you for the opportunity. So I think the biggest offering we have is our low-income transit pass program, where for $35 a month, you can access a monthly pass. It's also available for family members. And through that, we know that pre-pandemic, we had about 22,000 registrants who were in the program and benefiting from it. It has a sliding scale pricing model as well. So, if you're within a certain percent range of the low-income cutoff established by the federal government, you can get a $50 a month pass through that. For people that are at risk of houselessness and or experiencing houselessness, we provide free transit through the PATH program distributed through our social agency partners. For low-income or seniors experiencing low income, again, they get free transit as well. And then beyond that, we would look through our offerings, and kids 12 and under get fare free transit, et cetera. So there's a multitude of different tools available depending on what the needs are.
And with the smart card, if I heard you right, and there's a lot of moving pieces in this, but you wouldn't have to have the $35 right at the start. Am I right about that?
Yeah, so it's one of the really interesting features, I think, and benefits of the system. And, we're talking about launching in early fall, and you can basically load your card with whatever you have. And with the different caps that we have, you'll get benefits. So if someone is only taking a couple of trips a week, rather than having to upfront that full cost, they can do it incrementally. And then once they reach the cap, the rest of the month they're riding without any additional charges.
So they'd pay $35 incrementally, but they could have as much transit as they could use then.
Factoring in the different caps, yes.
Yeah. And how are we helping people who are working poor or working poor families, challenged families, homeless people? How are we communicating and helping them with this, these accommodations, if that's the right word? We're trying to help them out. How are we making sure they know about it and we can walk them through whatever process it is to get the lower cost transit fares or passes?
So I think we have a good network of different resources working together in order to help people understand how to access these programs. So through our social development branch, we have a financial empowerment team that's actually working with exactly the population you've described. We also have a lot of information out in the community through different resources, so libraries, et cetera. Lots of information available online. And we have, obviously, people on our phone system that are answering questions and referring people. So we are, multiple different channels trying to reach people about these offerings.
I'm out of time. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We're out of committee members. Maybe I'll hop in then. So our policy is targeted subsidy, not broad subsidy. Fair summary?
That is correct.
Though there is a broad subsidy to all riders, because full cost recovery for a trip would be well more than $3.50 or $3.75.
That is also correct.
So that reflects the public good, and we've done a fair bit of analysis as part of the policy review here. So the other suggestion that service is deteriorating, I mean, quite apart from reduced service levels on account of the pandemic, we're now maintaining a full service level in this wave, notwithstanding the current restrictions, to support distancing and to support the recovery of the system. So we're taking a massive loss leader as it is to maintain the frequency of the service in spite of ridership being half what it normally would be and revenue being market proportionately down. Yes?
Absolutely. Since the end of August last fall, yes.
And I mean, we're going to have a whole other discussion about the merits of bus network redesign in a few hours, but I just want to clear up one popular misconception that was perpetuated again this morning, which is that there will be reduced service. There will be different service, but there are no service hours being reduced. As a matter of fact, Council added back in hours that administration thought you could safely recommend that we could trim, but we actually added back in the hours so that pound for pound, there's no loss of hours in the bus network redesign. Correct?
100% correct.
There are fewer routes because we have less meandering, inefficient routes, and those are being consolidated and restructured to align with the city plan.
Yes, that
Objectives.
is correct, and we're using on-demand service to supplement our traditional conventional service.
But there's no loss of provision of service hours, and our modeling indicates that those service hours will yield much more net, not for everybody. We're hearing a lot about the folks whose trips will be longer, and there are some, and this is a utilitarian public policy challenge, but the vast majority of people's trips will be slightly faster, slightly more efficient, and therefore the system will be more inviting and capacity will be deployed to support the growth of ridership much more effectively than with the 25-year-old bus network that we're replacing.
That is correct.
Provided we don't change our minds later, but not to prejudice that discussion.
More direct and a high-frequency corridor is being created.
Okay, well, to me, that sounds like better service, but as they say, if you stay around long enough, you become the villain. So anyway, I better stop there. Any other committee members on the board right now? Okay, not seeing any. Councillor Knack is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to confirm, based on the presentation, when it comes to cash fares, while there will be, I think what I've heard, sort of kiosks and you can go into vendors, will there still be cash accepted on the bus?
Yes, we will still have cash accepted. Our preference, obviously, is that people adopt the smart fare payment technology.
Are we planning to phase that out over time, the acceptance of cash fares at some point?
No, I would caution against that. I think that would present some equity issues.
Yeah. So can you, do we know what percentage of users are expected to be still using cash once we make this switch? Recognizing we'll have cash kiosks, we'll have a lot of these other things. How many people do you think would still be using cash?
I don't have that figure. Perhaps Mr. Ryan is on the call. I'm not sure if he is familiar with that. If not, we could follow up.
Yeah, the use of cash has been declining up until the beginning of the pandemic. It's increased slightly as recovery has increased. In 2019, it was approximately 11% of all fares were cash based. In 2020, it was just a little over 12% were cash based, but that 2020 number is a reversal of trends that we've seen from previous years, which has been a movement away from cash into other fare products.
Perfect. So with the exception of this year, we've been trending down in that direction, right? Generally 11, 12, we've been going down. Were we originally, so when smart fare was first being talked about, we were thinking about things like distance-based fare. There would still be a flat fee, but it might be based on distance instead of one flat citywide fee. Is that right?
Maybe I'll ask, Mr. Robar is on the line. He's been overseeing the implementation approach, and he can reference that question.
So yeah, distance-based fares is still a capability of our system in the future. So we are looking at a value proposition to commuters based on distance, and certainly for those who travel short distances, it would be a short or a smaller fee than people who travel longer distances. This smart fare system, as initially set up, will be done under a flat fare system, but we'll have the capability to grow in the future should council want to proceed on that option.
Perfect. Who makes, and I'm sorry, I should have asked this question after my last one before, which was who makes up the current group of that 11% of people who are still using cash? Is it seniors? Is it people who are struggling? What do we see as the general makeup of that group?
So unfortunately, we don't have the demographics, and I think that's the benefit of moving to the smart fare system. So what I would say is, you know, we've seen a shift to Mr. Ryan's point of behavior because people are traveling in different ways. So they may not be doing a 5-day-a-week or 6-day-a-week travel pattern, so the occasional user, and I think that accounts for that slight increase to 12%, maybe choosing to just deposit cash in the fare box.
Do we have any assumptions on who would, I recognize we don't have the data, but I feel like it's, you know, I feel like I could safely assume that seniors who are maybe less technically savvy or who are doing fewer trips would use cash. I could assume, as we've heard from our speakers, that folks who maybe don't have the upfront money to buy a pass have been using cash. Do we think that's a fair estimate, guess, as best we could?
Sorry. I think it's a possibility, Councillor. We've done quite a bit of customer research as well. So what I'd like to do is I'll get the team to go through the results and see if we've measured that, and then we can follow up with everyone.
So all of those questions lead up to this piece, which is that we're expecting around 90% of transit users to be transitioning over to this system, which is, in fact, we'll actually see a reduction of their per trip fare to $3. And while I appreciate that other municipalities have had a discrepancy between cash and a flat fare, I'm not sure I understand. So if 90% of folks are already going to be paying $3 a trip, what's the benefit to charging the remaining 10%, most likely those who have reasons that they can't take advantage of what the 90% can, to be charged a different rate? I know we want to encourage people, but I feel like the encouragement is simplicity. I mean, the actual product itself. So I'm actually not debating between the $3.75 and $3.50. I'm just wondering why we wouldn't charge every Edmontonian $3 and over time encourage people to get over to smart fare, because that's the right approach.
So I'll start and maybe get Mr. Robar to chime in. So other properties, what they've seen is people are change resistant. So you'd end up seeing people not transitioning over to smart fare. So it's about incentivizing those and our fare policy talks about providing benefits to more frequent users. But maybe Eddie wants to talk about it a bit too.
Yes, certainly from the fare policy perspective, we built this whole fare policy based on affordability. I think giving the layers of the service and being able to ensure that we're taking care of those who need it was a big part of that conversation. Certainly on the cash fare side of it, lowering or deterring people from using cash fares as much as possible, and then giving the ability for those who truly need to do that avenues to kind of deal with that was part of this fare policy objective. And in other cities in smart fare implementations, seeing the uptick in the transition to a smart system is something you need to really look at from a policy perspective to move people from that cash world into a more convenient kind of electronic world.
I'm out of time. I might have another question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Banga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to, I guess it's probably in the same direction as Councillor's next question. It's if we, let's say, approved and from 350 to 375, how much difference it's going to make to the annual budget, let's say?
Thank you, Councillor. So in the budget process, the incremental cash fare increase for the year equaled $800,000 roughly in fare-related revenue projections as part of the budget process.
Okay, and then the idea of having this is to basically, I guess, encourage, force, whatever you want to call it, people to use smart fare.
That is correct. That's what transit agencies typically do. And by having the difference in price points, you're able to offer the discount for the smart fare users. And it also reduces the costs associated with cash handling and the treasury management side of cash fares too.
Yeah. So it's basically it's the same thing. Those are the people using and those I guess the cash fares. They're probably the most vulnerable people who either use transit once in a while or even often, but they are the ones that cannot afford to pay even the little increase it is. So I am basically of the same mentality that so we are punishing the very same people that we are supposed to be helping. What are your thoughts on it?
I disagree. I think we offer a number of different tools to help people who are in need. Again, speaking from personal experience, I understand the impacts of these types of costs, and I think people can get the discounted pass even if you're an occasional user for that $35 price point and/or a free pass through the PATH program, and having children ride for free, etc. So. I understand your point. At the same time, I think the occasional users who would use cash for the occasional trip would have access to a lower price point through one of the 117 different smart fare vending machines to get that ticket instead of depositing the coins.
Okay. And then there was discussion of those 1,900 free passes. Are they all taken up?
Yeah, so we increased the number in October of last year, recognizing the program design that was approved. It was intended to match the houselessness figure for the city. So we went from 600 a month to 1,900 a month. Our social agency partners do that distribution with us, and we've been able to have those in the hands of those in need, again, on a monthly basis.
Okay. And when we say that, as the mayor stated, pound per pound, no service hours are reduced. So it's the same number of service hours. However, we have routes. Some areas are that were not being served. They're being served now. So obviously, those are coming at the expense of existing routes, I guess. Is that not a reduction in service?
No, it's not a reduction in service, it's a reallocation. So it's working with the existing service hours and creating that high frequency corridor and responding. We have some neighborhoods that didn't really have much weekend service that now are going to see reliable service. I understand it's a change. I understand it's a difference in certain neighborhoods, but we've been able to offset where the demand exists with some on-demand options as well. But overall, it's a reallocation, redistribution of being more efficient with the resources we have.
Okay. So I just want to ask you again. The difference is $800,000 per year that we are talking about recuperating.
In the budget submission, the revenue associated with that cash fare in 2021, that's the equivalent amount, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Essinger?
Thank you very much. And I just want to have a few questions around 7.1. And I appreciated the summary of how many people are riding the bus, ridership as well as costs. But I did see a note in there about that seniors' annual passes and their monthly passes have not just decreased as much as other products. So the assumption is that they're more reliant on transit. Do I have that correct?
Yes, that is correct. That's what our analysis showed.
What I don't see here is the impact of the number of low-income riders. Do we have a sense that more or less are, I know we've done the monthly passes, but some of the other categories, do we have a sense if they've gone up or down?
So my understanding is that the kind of sales in those categories have been performing better than other categories, but I'll ask Mr. Ryan to weigh in if he has more specific details about our low-income products.
Yeah, the low-income products are, the sales of low-income products are generally performing better measured against their pre-pandemic sales. Adult monthly passes, for example, are less than half of what they were in a pre-pandemic measure, whereas the low-income transit pass, we take all three tiers, are probably at about 60% of their pre-pandemic levels. So there definitely is a higher floor for the low-income transit passes than we see in other transit products.
So we can assume then that they're more reliant on transit, and so, but they are taking advantage of the products we have available, correct?
Yes, that would be my interpretation as well.
Do you have any sense about the uptake of the family pass? Of course, I'm not sure where people are going, but do you have a sense, has that gone down dramatically as well in comparison to low income or seniors?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask Mr. Ryan again if he has that data to answer.
Yeah, for 2020, the day pass followed the same pattern as the regular transit product, not the steeply discounted ride transit product, but more it was the decline in the use of the day pass followed more in line with the adult tickets and adult monthly passes. So it is about half of the prior year sales.
Okay. And now when I jump over to the smart fare, will people that have access to a lower income, whether they're a senior or low income, be able to use the smart fare and get the discounted rates on that?
Yes, so it's part of the phased implementation, and perhaps Mr. Robar wants to jump in on that piece.
Yes, so they will be able to get their discounted passes on the smart fare system. The first phase of implementation will take care of all of our annual pass users, so anything on UPass and our adult fare programs, and then our discounted passes will come in closer to the end of the year. So low income, seniors, youth passes will be phased in towards the end of the year.
So we'll have better statistics as well then with that. So thank you very much. That's my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Essinger. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I have a question about the timing issue, and I don't think it's a secret that I'm not keen on the idea of raising fares to begin with, but I do actually think this discount for anybody using the smart fare, is a move in the right direction. I don't have a problem with that. The problem is we have a gap in between. We're raising fares theoretically on May 1st, and the advantage of smart fare is at best not going to become available until the fall, which is a whole other sore point, but that's nothing we can do about that. So I'm wondering if there's a timing issue here we need to look at. That for those people that can't afford to shell out at the beginning of the month, we're not going to be able to help them until fall, and that those individual fares are going to have an effect upon them until then. And is that something we've looked at?
Councillor, we haven't looked at delaying the timing of the fare increases. We were working towards what had previously been approved. Perhaps in regards to what those impacts might look like, I'm going to ask Ms. Pearson if she could just provide a little context around how that fare increase relates to our overall budget submission.
Well, just before, and I'm looking forward to that, because part of the premise for doing the fare increase was that it helps pay for the discount for Smart Fare. The fact that we now don't have Smart Fare until even later than we thought we were going to have it must affect that balance. So I just ask that as an addendum to that question.
My apologies if I gave that impression. So that planned cash fare increase was part of achieving a revenue objective through the 4-year budget process. By offering and redistributing pricing across all the different products, it enables us that ability to provide these supportive tools related to affordability. So I apologize if I implied it was a direct one-to-one connection.
No, I understand it's not one-to-one, but it has an effect on the overall intake, right? It's going to have an effect, the sooner these discounts come in, if we have 90% pickup, I'm guessing we'll see a whole bunch more ridership as a result, which is part of the point here. Because we're bringing the fares down and making it easier. But the fact that Smart Fare is being delayed must be affecting that overall fare intake.
I would say that that's a fair assessment, I think, in terms of acknowledging that there'll be that 3 or 4 month period where Smart Fare is not in place.
And Councillor, if you're looking, we have built the budget and all the tax assumptions based on the approved fare, as Mr. Seabrook had indicated. And so there is the gap potentially, but that revenue then would have to be made up somewhere else to accommodate the current budget.
No, I understand that. I just think, and I realize we're not, that I think we will have I'm guessing, just Ms. Person while you're on, in terms of what we do with that fare freeze, we're going to have one more crack at that when we do SOBA, I presume.
I assume so, depending on the discussion that happens today. Of course, we do have SOBA, and it's out that does assume that the fares are as approved previously.
Yeah. But really all we're being asked to do today is create a new fare category that hopefully we can get on as fast as we can. It doesn't really,
yes.
We will have another crack at the question of whether or not that freeze should continue. And I would argue there's a good argument to say it should continue until we can get Smart Fare in place. But
we can have that discussion at SOBA, absolutely, Councillor.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Those are my questions.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So isn't this sort of a case of the rubber meeting the road when it comes to GBA plus lenses? From our perspective, we say, look at all the product offerings we have. We have a number of different categories that people can access and sort of think that that's okay. But the reality of people's lives may be that, A, they have no idea about these offerings because they're busy trying to live their life and survive, or B, they don't have time, and C, they're in really desperate situations, but they're not so desperate that they're seeking help, but they're maybe a couple months behind on rent. And then they've got to make all these decisions about food or bills or whatever. So that's my question about this GBA plus lens. It's kind of coming from people who have some privilege rather than coming from the people who are experiencing the reality. Is this not the case?
So we did an extensive GBA Plus analysis through the program evaluation of the Low Income Transit Pass program, and I totally appreciate what you're saying. That was led by an external third party and took firsthand accounts from people directly involved with the program, different perspectives, not just users.
Right. So sorry, I have to interrupt you there. Yeah, and so we've got all these programs. Great. But I can tell you that there is a portion that has been missed. And let me demonstrate it this way. We've got a carrot and a stick here. The carrot is $3 if you switch to the pass. Great. The stick is, if you don't, you're paying more. Well, that works for most people as sort of incentives. But for people who really almost can't even afford it, or they save up and literally scrounge change to afford it. That stick is not a prod, it's a bludgeon. Can we understand this?
I do understand what you're saying, yes. Thank you.
So the other thing is, I am kind of curious about how we collect our numbers for ridership. I mean, I understand with SmartFare we're going to get much more accurate readings. But right now, we've got this massive decrease in ridership. We've got the BNR, which is going to cause a little bit of confusion for people as they get used to it. But every stress point, be it fare, be it changes to transit, so on and so forth, decreases ridership numbers. We know this. And when people move from bus to car, they're extremely unlikely to come back to bus. We know this, right? So for $800,000, I'm just having real trouble seeing the trade-off as a benefit. And I'm just wondering if this, like, am I making myself, like, I'm just wondering how this argument is landing, because I really want to support everything that administration comes forward with on transit, but this one's hard. So I'm just wondering if you can sort of help me out here, based on everything I said.
So what I would say is we have you're touching on, there's a number of different levers that impact ridership decisions, absolutely. And, considering all of the levers together is really important, which I think you've also acknowledged. At the same time, you're highlighting equity issues and you're highlighting the importance of that gender-based analysis, which I completely agree with. We take our direction from council, if it's the will of council, to explore. And I think the motion that was approved a couple of weeks ago about that anti-racism lens, is another example of going, taking the appropriate steps to ensure we remove those barriers that may exist and to look at it from a more inclusive lens. So I'm not sure if that's helpful for you, but I think you're highlighting the interconnectedness of those levers as it impacts ridership. I do have research conducted that gives me a sense that ridership will recover, and these elements are important to be considered as part of that ridership recovery.
Yeah. Okay. No quarter given. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And sorry, I do have a few more questions. When we were chatting a bit earlier, and we've heard it through some of the questions today, the intent of this discrepancy is to encourage folks. We've heard that, right? That carrot piece. But what I also heard today is that 89% of Edmontonians already don't use cash. So in my mind, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but it feels like we did it. Like in a way, like, haven't we done it? We're already there, and therefore a difference. Are we talking about shifting the remaining 11% in entirely, or are we more assuming we're going to get another 4 or 5%? But like, it feels to me on the day SmartFare starts, we're already going to have 89% of Edmontonians using that without having even had this conversation about a change. Is that an incorrect assumption that we'll have 89% of folks not use cash?
So, Councillor, that would be based on the previous observations we had prior to the pandemic. Certainly, we would see as ridership recovers and society recovers from the pandemic, that we would go back to that and continue to progress to less cash. I think ultimately we're trying to get as much cash out of the system for a number of reasons that were alluded to. And certainly, the experience we had at the start of the pandemic was a desire to go to more cash-free / contactless methods of payment for a number of reasons. So this aligns with some of those aspects of safety as well as efficiency. And I think we don't have a specific target in mind. As Ms. Houghton McDonald alluded to, we always would have the intent of trying to allow a cash payment in the event that someone has no other options. And that would
Yeah.
be so that we do create that option for equity. So I think
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm fully on board with I would love to see 100% using SmartFare because that's going to give us the best data. That's going to allow us to make the most informed decision possible. But I feel like I'm trying to, we've had this conversation, and on day one, we should be assuming we're going to move from 0% sort of data. And I say that somewhat glibly because we have some data, but we don't have as informed data, to 89% informed data. Which to me is already a huge win. So I'm wondering if I guess I'm not sure I see how this shift, if we think it will actually move those 11% over in a meaningful way, or if through more efficient use of the system, through just a convenience, like to me, like that's the benefit. Like the fact that 89% of people already aren't using cash means that they've found that to be more beneficial than the current options available to them. So does having a differential fare actually help us bring over that additional 11%, or do we assume that most of them might not for a variety of other reasons, maybe due to lack of technology, maybe due to different things?
So the experience in other jurisdictions is it incentivizes more people to adopt the payment technology. And back to the fair policy principles, it provides added benefits for more frequent users, because the assumption being the more frequent the user, they're gonna move over. I wouldn't suggest we assume that the 89% will all adopt this. It is a significant change and a phased implementation. It's going to require just as much effort as our BNR does for supporting people through that transition. I'm optimistic, but I just want to caution you not to assume it's going to be exactly the same.
No, that's a fair. Yeah, and I'm just curious. Like, are the 89% or a portion of suddenly going to go back to cash because they feel less comfortable if they haven't been using cash before? But it's a fair point. We don't have that data. So last question. So what did we budget for cash fares in transit in 2021? I might have missed that earlier.
Yeah, so it's approximately 800,000. I'll firm up all of those figures as part of the SOBA. I'll work with our finance partners.
That's the total amount in cash, assuming a $3.50, $3.75 fare, correct?
That was my understanding, yes.
So what have we collected as of March 31st, approximately? I imagine we'll have the first quarter.
No, because the cash fare increase was paused until May 1st. That was the
No, sorry. Okay, your question or your answer was if we increase it by another 25 cents, that brings in an additional 800,000. Is that?
That's correct.
What I'm curious about is how much cash we budgeted for total, what we're at as of March 31st, and if we're on trend to hit that or not.
So I don't have that at my fingertips, but I'll happily follow up with council with that information.
Okay. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor McKean.
Mr. Mayor, I would put the recommendation on the floor, recognizing that it's a recommendation to council. Council will be able to further dig into this, and there's obviously a lot of interest.
Thank you. The motion is on the floor for debate, and noting that it will be at council next week as well. So, are there any additional comments? Or can we save the discussion for a week from now? We do have one other item to get through this morning, so. Councillor McKean, did you want to introduce it?
Yeah, just very quickly, I would thank everybody for their participation this morning, advocating for vulnerable Edmontonians, which we have discussed on numerous occasions in the past. We've dealt with budget issues in the past, and the bus network redesign, all these things sort of at great length in the past, but there's some new interest, obviously, from my colleagues after submissions today in the midst of a pandemic to have further discussions about this, but this would move the item up to council for discussion if people wanted to reopen the debate and bring forward subsequent motions. So I think it's time we moved along, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette?
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I guess we'll be talking about this in council as well. One of the things that occurs to me is that $800,000 number comes from pre-pandemic ridership. That has been effectively halved. And so we're really talking about $400,000 or less or more. We don't even have an accurate number. But what we do know is that the cash fare increases will absolutely, without doubt, we cannot even pretend that it's not going to be the case. It will impact the most vulnerable among us in far greater ways than we can imagine. Like, this is how it is, that it is difficult to imagine that a quarter makes a difference. But that is the reality for a lot of people. There are a lot of people living in poverty in this city who do not avail themselves of any social services, do not avail themselves of any government assistance. They're living in quiet desperation. And that ranges from teenagers who've been kicked out of their homes to folks who have gone through hell in residential school system, folks who find themselves mired in mental health issues or addictions, seniors who are too proud to access some of these services. This is real. And frankly, I don't even know what to say, because I understand the argument. I understand the needs of a corporation. I understand that we need to squeeze every dime out of our system that we can through efficiencies. But, you know, that's for the corporation. We're also a government charged to serve Edmontonians as best we can. And I'm pretty confident that the majority of Edmontonians would say, just leave it alone for now. So that's just where my position is. Thanks.
I got to ask a clarifying question then. Ms. Houghton McDonald, is the 800,000 the base assessment, or is that the cash impact notwithstanding the ridership? Because now I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was the original total value of increasing just the cash fare portion for the full year of 2021, is my understanding.
With or without COVID impacts?
That does not take into account any COVID adjustments, which is why I'd like to work with finance, and we'll have all the appropriate figures ready for SOBA.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to jump in, but we've made some adjustments, but we've considered them one time for COVID, and therefore we would like some time to work with them to present the full picture, because if we consider this a longer term adjustment, we are creating some longer term pressures for council without considering the ins and outs of COVID as one time and the ongoing revenue reduction. I don't know if that made sense, but I just highlighting the caution of dropping that down to 400,000.
Reduction requires ongoing source of funds equals tax increase. One-time reduction can come from the reserve.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's just to anticipate what the different proposals will have to contemplate in the discussion that will inevitably happen again next week. So I see, thank you, I just needed that clarified. Any other comments before we vote? Not seeing any, please vote. Oh, my thing's gone to sleep here. It's going to be that kind of day. I'm a yes.
Thank you. And we have 3 votes, Mr. Mayor.
Display the vote.
Our system has frozen, Mr. Mayor. I can confirm that there were 3 votes in the affirmative for those present, and Councillors Hamilton and Walters are absent.
Thank you. Okay, that recommendation up to council is carried. We have one more item before us today, which is 6.8, the Edmonton Place Brand Strategy. Is there a presentation on that one?
There is not, Mayor.
Okay.
Ms. Sturgeon is available for questions as well as myself.
Okay. Questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can't click on though.
Go ahead, Councillor McKean.
Yeah, thanks. Ms. Virgin, this comes up every time. We're not looking at a slogan, right?
That's correct, Councillor. We believe that our best approach to the place brand strategy is really about describing the experience of being an Edmontonian, whether you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, an innovator, an arts leader. This is really about storytelling first and foremost, and really describing the experience of the people, the business leaders who have built things in Edmonton.
And I would just add, Councillor, that, you know, a clear example to me is it's not about slogans at all. It's about the fact of clarifying, for example, that Dr. Houghton is a professor at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, as opposed to the misperception a lot of people have that he's in Calgary, for example.
Have we ever talked to the U of A, McEwen and Nate, about adding that subhead to their all their graphic materials? So it'd be the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in Edmonton, because I know that, I've heard it anecdotally, I'll admit, but people thinking that the U of A is in Calgary.
In fact, I don't know what's happened in the past, but I've booked a meeting in the next couple of weeks with some of the post-secondaries to discuss that very issue. So we'll have an update later. Yeah,
and even even the Stantec's and PCLs of the world, if we could ask them if they would do that, because going right back to the capital region, it seems like we have lost so many opportunities to put Edmonton into branding, whether it be a company or a post-secondary, and I think it's time to challenge those folks. Honestly, if you're proud to be part of Edmonton, we want to see that in your letterhead, on your cards, whatever it is, add that to your brand.
Absolutely, and I would say this strategy really gets us to those kinds of very practical examples.
And just to layer onto what Mr. Corbould has just said, the conversations that we've been having with those institutions, they're very supportive of this strategy. They want to work together with us, so we're very confident that we'll make some advancements with this.
Yeah, I think there's examples in the U.S. where universities, USC, Berkeley, or whatever, they actually add that in. So, I really think that could be an important part, and it might be one of the reasons that a lot of Canadians don't know much about Edmonton. So I really encourage that work, and I'm happy to hear you're doing that. You mentioned, Ms. Sturgeon, art, and I really do think sometimes we forget about how important and how amazing our local culture, art, music, culinary scene is, and I'm hoping we don't forget that. But I saw that in, I don't know if I saw it mentioned with emphasis in the framework that I looked at. Any comments back to me on that?
It's definitely a part of it, Councillor McKean. To your point, it is a very rich part of what Edmonton is. We'll be working very closely with Maggie Davison at Explore Edmonton, just to make sure we're working collaboratively and not overlapping our work. But absolutely, it's a big part of this.
And the EPL, I don't know if the Edmonton Public Library was mentioned in the framework, but what amazing partners they've been, and Library of the Universe or something. It seems like only 2 years ago. It was probably much longer than that, but
2016, yeah.
yeah. So, they would be another thing. And I'm going to try to get my last question in here. I think Edmonton as an Indigenous city is unique, will be more and more unique, and something to really be proud of, and to showcase the talent. Again, we come back to art in a way, but the number of dancers, singers, drummers, visual artists in our Indigenous community is amazing, and I'm hoping that's something that Edmonton will include in a prominent way in our place brand. Your comments on that, Ms. Sturgeon?
We have a separate strategy that looks just at the Indigenous element of the Edmonton story. And so it's one that we will dig into over time. We want to do it appropriately. I imagine that it will go beyond storytelling, and really focusing on the opportunities, for example, of our proposed urban reserve, of Aboriginal businesses, of Aboriginal artists, and culture leaders as well. Yeah.
Thanks. I might come around with one more question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKean. I'm interested to see what Councillor Henderson asked, so I'm going to go to him next.
Thanks. It may have been what you were going to ask. Just given the discussion we had yesterday, it seems to me, we've got to pony up first, or continue to pony up, but there's probably real value in telling the story around energy transition, especially in consideration of the kind of reputation that Alberta has. And I just wondered if that's going to be part of our storytelling.
It will for sure. We have some great examples with Blatchford and business here. So if we think about wanting to attract 1 million more Edmontonians here, that's going to be a selling feature. Yep. So we absolutely have to include that in the strategy, and that's our intention.
Well, I just, and I think we have to continue to take a leadership role. I mean, that's the kind of thing that can evaporate on you quickly. I mean, the actions are going to be important. But at the moment, I think we are taking a leadership role, and I'm not sure, and I think we're getting some attention for it. But I think, as long as we're in that role, running with that, I think it's one of the things I think people are going to be looking for.
Agreed.
And it has all sorts of other spin-offs in terms of the way people think of your city in terms of other kinds of ways as well. So I just wanted to make sure, because I think we'd be missing a piece of the puzzle if we didn't run with that one right now anyway. And hopefully if we continue to step up, we'll be able to continue to run in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it speaks to opportunity here, which is a central component of this strategy.
Great, thanks. Those are only questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Caterina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for that. Mr. Corbo, you had mentioned a number of the post-secondaries that you're going to be engaging, and the ones you mentioned certainly are worth the conversation. The one that I didn't hear was Concordia University. They've gone from college to university, and now they're in the process of not just Concordia University, but Concordia University of Edmonton specifically is the path that they're on through their board and everything else. So I really wanted just to flag that to make sure that they are included in your discussions, or they're included in the group that you'll be speaking to, because they actually are going to that name change specifically for the reasons that we're discussing today, is to identify themselves as Edmonton. And the change from college to university in the last number of years has grown their international presence. and stature immensely because people didn't recognize them as a college. It was a college and not very prestigious. As a university, they've had extremely good results, especially internationally. In recognition. So just to flag that they're a part of the conversation.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. They are part of the conversation. Actually, President and I were talking about something else a few weeks ago, and this came up, and we're very supportive, and we'll make sure that they're on our list for sure.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I just wanted to flag that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Caterina, for flagging that. And I think, you know, we've been talking more about how to organize Team Edmonton to do advocacy and Team Edmonton Metro as well to do advocacy, particularly at the provincial level, but also nationally and internationally from an investment attraction standpoint. So, and I agree with you, I think post-secondaries are one of our best avenues there, all of them, including YTC and Athabasca as well. So that whole ecosystem is itself a differentiator for us, what's left of it anyway. And I agree with the flag about Indigenous. So these aren't questions. I guess these are feedback leading eventually to a question. But I really support Councillor McKean's line of questioning around indigeneity, and I think we see that in the tourism strategy very clearly. But I think that there are, you know, we talked a little bit yesterday to Councillor Henderson's point about sort of the values behind the brand. I mean, you can have a slogan, which doesn't work, I think, and I'm really glad that there isn't a slogan, Mary. But you can have values, and I think, you know, in ESG broadly, you can include the climate and energy leadership, as well as inclusion, indigeneity, reconciliation, anti-racism, all of the things that have been recurring themes for us here, as well as innovation and entrepreneurship and opportunity. And it's so I guess maybe the question is, when you have a brand that is a composite of many of those strong values, how do we, without turning it into a slogan, consolidate that? And, you know, I like what Edmonton Global has done, for example, with sort of a go-to of young, educated, and growing, which is very talent-focused, which I think is one of our standout differentiators. I'm pitching to them that the G needs to be green and to really pitch the ESG side of things so that we can grow again. But I guess, you know, this is very good, and I think catalogs a lot of the things that we've talked about here and covered today. But talk to me a little bit about distillation.
Well, I can start, and perhaps Mr. Corbould can add in. Over the past few years, Mr. Mayor, as you know, the previous work around place brand really found that Edmonton came down to four things: open, collaborative, inventive, and courageous. And I think there's a lot of space in those four brand attributes, if you will, to cover off all that you've just described. And while I really want to avoid going down the route of a slogan, those attributes help to ground how we categorize the stories that we tell of the people here and the various subjects that you've described.
And I would just add, Mayor, that you know, I would agree with what Ms. Sturgeon said, but I think it also depends who we're talking to and what we're talking about. And I think it's okay to have a different word or concept within our brand strategy, depending on who we're talking to and who we're trying to whose attention we're trying to get. So, for example, I think there's a huge aspect of Edmonton that should be, we're talking about being a learning city. And, you know, there are possibilities such as applying for the UNESCO learning city designations, which is something we're sort of taking a quick look at. So I would just say part of it is who the audience is, and it's okay to have a slightly different message to different audiences based on different needs.
I completely agree, because I think talent is one set of messages, investments another set of messages, governments are a different set of messages, and sadly in Alberta, Edmonton has become synonymous with government, particularly with people who are not happy with government, and so that, in the Alberta context, requires a different response, the way we sometimes groan about Ottawa, and Ottawa is a lovely place, so it's not fair. So segmentation, I totally agree with, and I think we've categorized the right considerations here. I think building the coalition to do this work coherently is a work in progress, but I think this advances that too. So thank you for this work. Councillor McKean is next.
Thank you. A little bit of a preamble. I used to work in journalism, and one of my colleagues complained to me all the time that he wished he was in New York, because there were so many stories to tell in New York. And I always challenged him on that. I think there's a million great stories in Edmonton. And you talk about storytelling as integral to this place brand strategy. And Ms. Sturgeon, I wonder, with the dissent of mainstream media, with all due respect to those that are still fighting and clawing every day to report the news, how do we, in this modern context, I'm sure you guys have given it a lot of thought, but how best do we tell our story so it reaches beyond our borders? But also, I just remember a recent example we had of the story was that Edmontonians don't necessarily know all the stories about, the PCLs or the EPLs or whatever it is, that we really have a ton to boast about here. And I wonder if we have a comprehensive strategy to tell those stories in a way that busts past the border and, sink into people so they understand it.
Yeah, great question. I heard a couple of questions in there, Councillor McKean. That's okay. To answer your question about getting our story beyond the border, that's really where our campaigns come in. We can rely on old-fashioned media relations and pitching stories to national and international media, depending on what the goals of a particular initiative might be. So that's one element. And then the other element is ensuring that we have an army of advocates within Edmonton who have reach outside of this city and outside of this province, to make sure that they understand what it is about Edmonton that's special, what it is about Edmonton that attracts people, and makes it a feasible place to invest. So it's a bit two-pronged, but really focusing on those campaigns and making sure that not just the City of Edmonton and all of you councillors can speak about Edmonton, but the engaged Edmontonians who understand what this place is and how special it is.
Yeah, it's almost an internal communications effort, right? And maybe it should start with City of Edmonton employees. I wondered if you'd thought about that, about sort of almost, I hate key messages. I hate that term, but it's the old reporter in me. But I mean, there's so many hidden gems. If Edmonton is a hidden gem, there are a million hidden gems in Edmonton that I suspect, or stories that Edmontonians don't know. So if we arm them with those stories when they head out to travel, they will become brand advocates for us as well. And I know I've talked to many people who've moved here from other parts of the world who adore this place.
Yeah.
and they become great advocates for us. And I'm just tired of this reputation we have, and I think we can do a lot. And I wish you nothing but the best in this work, because I think it's really important, even just from a civic pride point of view. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to make the recommendation.
Thank you.
Which is it just? Oh, I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if it's receipt for information or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm happy to make that, and I don't think I would briefly speak to it. I think I've already said what I needed to say, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McKean. Just a couple of comments. I know clock's ticking here, but I've thought about this a lot, and I'm grateful that many smart people are also thinking about it, because no one of us, even the mayor, I've discovered, can solve this one. Because there's a million people with their stories, most of whom love living here. Some don't, and that's okay. We hear lots from those folks, but there's no substitute for door knocking in an election. And I hope folks have the chance to do that COVID safe this fall, because you actually meet the people who make up this city, at least the parts of it a councillor gets to represent. And as mayor, I've got to meet people from every single corner of this city and walk of life. And by and large, people love living here. And that Longwoods International study from many years ago is still worth a look, because what it said that was really eye-opening and confidence-inspiring to council maybe 10 years ago was that Edmontonians, by and large, with some exceptions, know how good we have it here. The quality of public education, the economic opportunities, the opportunity to get outside, the vibrancy of the Arts and Culture Festival, the River Valley, the kindness of people to each other, by and large. And while none of those things are perfect, overall they add up to a really fantastic place to be, to live, to raise a family, to start something. All those things that keep coming back every time we look at this and actually talk to Edmontonians themselves. And the Longwood study found a gap between the perception of Edmontonians about, I think it was 95 quality of life indicators that they test on. And then they looked at key markets elsewhere in the country and found that folks who hadn't been here, didn't know this place, had spectacularly contrary assessments to what Edmontonians ourselves thought about all of the key quality of life indicators. And they told us, having done this kind of place brand research all around the world, that this was the largest such gap they had ever seen, confirming for us that we did not have a product problem, despite our congenital humility and concern, and this recovering perfectionist 14-year professional quest to make this place better. We have a phenomenal community here with so much going for it. And we are the first to give ourselves a hard time about it, partly because lots of other people give us a hard time, or we're just not on their radar. And mostly it's that we're not on their radar. I do think that's changing. I think we've got to keep pushing on it and change perceptions about this place by doing and delivering transformational things. I think the Walterdale Bridge has done more to facelift the front door postcard shot of the city than anything else I can think of. But then you poke a couple of 50 and 60 story towers and a resurgent downtown and another 27 kilometers of light rail, more than doubling the system. And we're doing a bunch of things that defy people's expectations in Edmonton, much less the rest of the country, of what this place is about. And when we take on climate, when we take on inclusion, when we take on reconciliation, when we take on innovation, when we take on entrepreneurship, when we take on hydrogen and greening the energy economy so we can be relevant for another 50 years, eventually people are going to notice that in the places where we need to draw talent and investment from. If we keep telling the story, segment the message, to Mr. Corbold's point, build all the proof points and the assets to continue to tell that, and as long as we don't get down on ourselves, which I think is our worst habit as a community. And I think we're getting over that too. I think that's a slow but steady change. I think COVID has really set that back everywhere, including here. I think the economic situation has put us into that circumstance and feeling of doubt as well. But when we back away, and I appreciate a report like this for the opportunity and the discussion over the last couple of days here to back away and look at what we're doing, it's pretty cool. We should be really proud. We have lots of good things to talk about, and we have lots of work to do, and we're not afraid to take it on, head on. And those are distinguishing features. Those will build the better community. Those will attract and retain the people over time. And I think right now, it's all opportunity. So I think this sets us up well to keep working on that with all the right partners. And I appreciate the report. Councillor McKean?
Yeah, I've decided I want to speak. I hope you don't mind. I'm really excited. I needed this item today. And I want to first thank Councillor Katarina. I think that was a really important mention he made of Concordia University and their name change. And I hope that becomes standard practice with our other post-secondaries and even our, made in Edmonton big business that has offices in other parts of the world. I just want to tell a quick story. I talk about a lot of amazing things, and two quick stories. One, Mr. Mayor, you were there. We were meeting with a large downtown property management company, and they were really kind of worried about the downtown. And I've said this to many people, and I got a little bit passionate that day, maybe even a little bit angry. Do not judge our downtown at this moment in time in the midst of a pandemic, given the billions of dollars that have been invested since Mayor Mandel's councils, which Councillor Henderson, Katarina, and Iveson were part of, to see the finally to start to invest in the downtown, which is foundational to the future of this city, because the downtown speaks to our values, our prosperity, our art, culture, and our downtown is not just going to be fine. It is going to be one of the finest downtowns in North America, I think, because it will be largely residential. There'll be no rolling up the sidewalks at 5 o'clock in Edmonton's downtown. Once we get past this point, LRT is all built. The residential towers that are already on the books are built. Our park opens. I think it's going to be amazing. Second story. I participated with Glee on a e-bike tour that was sponsored by then EEDC, and there were riders from around the world on that e-bike tour, from Berlin and Brooklyn and New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and other places. And what was really neat for me is we started from, I think, the 149th Street entrance into the River Valley. Andrew, you would know it well. And what I tried to do that day, because we sort of say Edmonton's River Valley, and those of us who grew up here, we sort of go, yeah. I experienced Edmonton's River Valley that day through the eyes of a visitor. And it is amazing. Our Central Park is amazing. And I just give that as one example of the many, many things and places and people we have to boast about here. And I hope you don't mind me going on and on, because I'm really excited about this city and the work that has been done, Mr. Mayor, under your leadership around some of the things you mentioned have been amazing. You will never get enough credit for that, but I'm throwing a little bit at you today because you have been a remarkable mayor And I don't have many more opportunities to say this at meetings and in public, but I wanted to say that today. And I want to thank all my council colleagues. We're helping to build, along with 14,000 people in administration, along with all our corporate and nonprofit partners and all our citizens, an amazing city. And it's going to be impossible to slogan that, but this place brand strategy looks really good. And Mr. Corbould, thank you for your work you've already done and your commitment to going off and arm wrestling with those post-secondaries to get them to put Edmonton in their name. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKean, and it is a team effort on all this. So well said, though. Please vote on receipt of information. Oh, it is coming up. Maybe. There it is. Yeah.
We have all the votes, Mr. Mayor.
Display the vote. Carried. And forgot to receive 7-1 for information, so if I can get a motion to that effect as well. So moved. Thank you, Councillor Cartmel. Please vote to receive 7-1 for information.
And we have 3 votes, Mr. Mayor.
Display the vote, please. Carried. And are there any notices of motion? Hearing none, then the work of Executive Committee is done. Thank goodness. Urban Planning had nothing on its agenda here for today. And then, so that finishes this meeting. And we'll be back at 1:30 as council continuing last Friday's unfinished work. So see you at 1:30. Till then, enjoy your lunch.